Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome indeed to today's webinar, which is brought to you by Shared Services Link and sponsored by ReadSoft. Today we're looking at riding the wave to a successful global AP operations. And I'm very pleased that we're going to be specifically looking at the W.R. Grace automation story. So I am your host and one of your speakers today. My name is Susie West and I'm the founder and CEO at Shared Services Link. And joining me today as my guest speakers are David Ulin, who is the Regional Manager at ReadSoft. David Ulin has been in the profession for more than 20 years and is very experienced in consulting on purchase-to-pay automation, working with companies largely in the Fortune 500 on their ERPs and with their workflows and with their document management technology. So we're very, very privileged to have David with us today. And we're also joined by Michelle Blessing, who is the Global Accounts Payable Manager at W.R. Grace. And it's her charge to be responsible for standardizing and streamlining the accounts payable process on a global basis at W.R. Grace. And as you well know, and we'll be finding out more from Michelle later, W.R. Grace is one of the world's leading specialty chemicals and material companies. So let's have a look at the agenda for the next 60 minutes. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the 8 trends in shared services today, and then handing over to David, who's going to be looking at the best practices in AP shared services, and then over to Michelle, who's really going to be looking at what they're doing at W.R. Grace. And then we'll find out a bit more about ReadSoft, and then move to questions in the last 10 minutes of this webinar. So in terms of questions, this is really where your proactive role kicks in. And I'm sure you have a lot of reasons that compelled you to log on today and take an hour out of your busy schedule to be here. So please do make sure that this investment of your time really does serve you. And do put your questions through to me. You've got a question box which I've highlighted here. So just submit your question to me nice and early, please. And I will put those questions to our speakers, our guest speakers, on your behalf in the last 10 minutes of the webinar. So do make sure that you utilize that opportunity and do make sure that you stay online for the last 10 minutes, please. So before I go into the first part of our agenda, I just want to start off, if I may, with a poll question. And we've got 3 poll questions during the course of this webinar. And for those of you that have joined this webinar for the first time, just to walk you through how the poll questions actually work. So we invite you to participate in the poll questions. We do look to get a participation of over 70%, and we do then share the results live. So it's great immediate real-time benchmarking that you are participating in. So the more of you that responds, the more meaningful is the benchmarking results. So poll question number 1, where are you in your shared services journey? Please tick the 1 box that applies. Are you currently looking into the shared services model? Are you designing shared services, setting up shared services, stabilizing shared services, and moving to CI, which stands for continuous improvement? Or are you maturing your shared services and moving to GBS, which stands for Global Business Services? So we're only at 46% of you having responded. If you do need a bit more time, please think about it and then tick the appropriate box. We're at 67%. Let's try and nudge that over 70%, please. And closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much. We close the poll with 75% of you responding, so very positive. Thank you. Coming up on your screen, really interesting results actually here. 44% of you are looking into the shared services model, so I'm really hoping that you're going to take huge benefit from investing your time into today. And then, if we go down the scale a little bit, if you will, 34% of you are in the stabilizing of shared services and moving into the CI, the continuous improvement part of your journey. Again, great to have you all on this webinar today. And no one actually in the actual setup, which is interesting, and we've got 14% in the maturing shared services and moving to GBS. So really interesting mix of people and levels of maturity that we've got on this webinar today, and you'll all be taking benefit from this session. Right, let's move on. So in terms of looking at the 8 trends in shared services today, I'm wanting to really bring to the table the trends that we're seeing here at Shared Services Link, and that we've been monitoring on a very kind of close basis. So the first trend that we've been identifying is that a lot of shared services organisations really are going global in their remit. So that's another reason why I'm delighted to have the WR Grace story being shared with us today. And obviously this brings with it a lot of kind of challenges, and one of those challenges is, of course, the standardization process. Because a lot of organisations do have a global footprint and are largely kind of lost and built up through mergers and acquisitions, there are huge issues around complexities with different ERPs, multiple ways in doing one thing, i.e. many processes. So this kind of push for a global remit really takes with it the need for standardizing processes and consolidating systems and really unifying and simplifying the way in which things are done. So we're seeing this being done, actually, I would say, almost call it on an aggressive basis. So it's something that I think is very positive for the shared services market generally. Something else that we're also seeing is multifunctional, and you may have seen this on a list of trends before, and that wouldn't be a surprise. But I think what we're seeing at Shared Services Link is a kind of more of an acceleration into the multifunctional aspect of shared services adoption. And this means that in the past, when we were interviewing and surveying people on what functions they had in shared services, 100% of people would say, of course, finance. And then in the organisations that would say either HR or procurement would probably be in the low to mid 40s. And what we're seeing now when we ask them is that it's into the high 40s and actually in the 50s as far as having HR and procurement and IT on board. And also moving into areas that are used to be considered not core for shared services, so marketing administration, sales administration. So this is a very exciting time for shared services as far as a growth opportunity is concerned. So the third trend that we're seeing is that we're seeing the reporting into one person. So rather than having, for example, the head of finance shared services, the head of HR shared services, the head of procurement shared services, we're seeing that actually there is one entity and it's all reporting into one person, and that one person may have a finance background, may have an HR background, may just be an all-rounded business person, may be from the front end, the kind of the more sales side of the business. So it depends, but what we're seeing is that this one person is a very senior individual, has a seat at the table, and what we mean by that is that they're on the board and they report directly into the CEO. So they are at the same level as the CFO, the COO, so they are basically embedded into the C-suite. And that person really is charged with running the shared services organization. So what we're beginning to describe here really, as many of you I'm sure have begun to pick up, is this mobilization to global business services. And some people might think of global business services as just shared services on steroids. It's a bit more nuanced than that, and these three things alone, shared services being global, multifunctional, and having one person to report into, are certainly very strong characteristics of GBS, of global business services. So moving on with another trend that we're seeing today, and again you could link this very tightly to the development of global business services, though we are seeing it in the world of shared services anyway, is the sharing of locations and technology platforms. So again, rather than having just a shared services centre for HR, another centre for finance, etc., there's really this opportunity to leverage the economies of scale and have the whole team in a footprint that is for shared services generally, or for global business services generally, so not divided by HR and finance. So these silos that actually exist in the world of functional shared services are also beginning to come down. So there's a real leverage of the opportunity to maximise investments in locations and also technology platforms as well. We're looking at ReadSoft today, and organisations are very aware that they can leverage an investment made in ReadSoft for finance into HR as well, because the document management aspect of a solution like ReadSoft is wholly appropriate for HR as it is for finance. So these are just some of the kind of the benefits that you're beginning to see ripple through. So moving on, process being seen as an end-to-end activity. Organisations that kind of treat processes as a broken process, with, for example, accounts payable doing the kind of the downstream part of purchase to pay and procurement doing the upstream part. Unfortunately, it's pretty much a given that they will continue to see their performance limited, because when you are treating a process in a way that is broken, then your KPIs will only go so far. So it's generally understood that if you do adopt an end-to-end treatment of your processes, then you're really beginning to move into a very different level as far as your KPIs and your performance is concerned. So we're definitely seeing a very high adoption of processes being treated as an end-to-end activity. And that takes me on to my sixth observation, the sixth trend in shared services that we're seeing today, which is the just transactional days are over. Now, what this doesn't mean is that those shared services organisations that are just focusing on just the transactional piece, because it's early days for them and they just want to get that piece sorted, then absolutely that is the area of focus. The transactional piece has always been the kind of the heartland of shared services. But the thing is that once you've kind of sorted out your data, and you've got clean data, it's reliable data coming into your shared services, then you've automated it proactively, again through solutions like the ReadSoft solution, then you're very capable and enabled to start moving into the value add and really looking at this timely data and really kind of looking at and leveraging the power that comes from that very timely data and translating it as management information, business intelligence for the business, and the value that comes from that opportunity really is quite exciting. It does start with just getting your processes sorted and getting your transactions nice and clean. So that really is, you know, the first part in what you could argue is a two-step journey. So when we talk about just transactional days are over, it really is moving into the value-added part of the business. Shared services are being seen as having brand equity. This means they are focusing much more on their reputation, their voice. They're looking to have a vision, and that vision is understood by the entire shared services organisation. People in the shared services centre, they know what their purpose is. So when they come in the morning and somebody says, oh, what do you do here? They are very passionate in their response, and they know what their contribution is to doing what it is that you need the shared services organisation to do. So a shared services organisation is developing, or we're seeing shared services organisations developing their brand equity. Used to be considered as the kind of the graveyard part of the business where people didn't want to go and work, and that's just not happening now. It's being seen as a very exciting part of the business where really good people want to be working. So there's a real shift as far as the brand equity is concerned. And then finally, this is a really important point, and the eighth trend that we're seeing in shared services today is the integrated aspect of the shared services organization with the business. So this means understanding from really senior management in the business, where do you want to be in 6 months' time? Do you want the company to be acquired? Are we acquiring? Are we going into emerging markets? What's our expansion plan? How important is cash for us right now? Where do you want to be in 6 months' time, 12 months' time? And therefore, where can we put our priority? How can we service you elegantly so that we can get to that goal quicker? And that basically represents an integration. And potentially you could argue that didn't necessarily exist kind of 3, 4, 5 years ago as much as it does exist today. So those really are the 8 trends that we're seeing. And just before I hand over to David, I would like to launch our second poll, please, coming up on your screen very shortly. We want to find out how many invoices you process today. So if you could respond by letting us know, is it less than 100,000, 100 to 200,000, 200 to 300,000, 300 to 500,000, is it more than 500,000? This is going to be a brief poll, so if you haven't responded, please do so. We're only at 43% of you responding, so do let us know how many invoices, so this is your purchase invoices coming in from your suppliers that you process in your accounts payable organization on an annual basis. So closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Let's have a look. We were at 68% of you responding there. So just under half of you at less than 100,000 and a quarter of you at more than 50,000. So an interesting spread there. So thank you very much indeed. Okay, so with that in mind, I'd now like to hand over, please, to David Yulin. Over to you, please, David.
Thanks, Susie. Let's talk about best practices in AP processing. If you look at the 3 categories that are listed here, best in class, industry average, and the term laggard, what you're going to see from the W.R. Grace story today is how companies have gone from manual or partially manual accounts payable operations to a shared services model, which has brought them tremendous efficiencies and lowered the cost of invoice processing. And key to these concepts is reducing the costs, reducing the errors, and increasing the efficiencies. And I mentioned the benefit of lowering the processing cost. When you look at the chart on the next page, you will see that the leading objective or benefit that companies gain from moving to this model is the lowering of the processing cost, the lowering of the invoice cost to process. And that sounds easy, but there are a lot of different factors that go into that. And that's what we're going to talk about with the W.R. Grace story, and that's what I'm going to focus on in my next few slides. It's the combination of putting in place the best practices, the right technology, and the right approach so that all of this comes together and you make these efficiency gains. So let's go ahead and drill into these best practices and what we have seen over the many years that ReadSoft has been involved with accounts payable, both here in the U.S. and globally. Number one is when companies have the ability to centralize invoice receipt into a single location in a shared service center, they are going to be operating much more efficiently than if it's distributed. And companies that are still operating in a distributed manner today are really in the minority. When you look at the best-in-class companies, they have moved to this shared service model. They've also moved to one centralized location. And for a lot of our global customers, the one centralized location can actually be regional. So you might have one centralized location in the US, there might be another one in Europe, there might be one for Asia Pacific. So we really are focusing on a regional shared service center because that shared service center knows all of the rules and regulations for the countries that they're going to be processing. A second point that is very, very critical and can make a major difference for organizations is to go ahead and make your invoice processing as simple as you possibly can and put the responsibility on the vendor to be sending that invoice in correctly. And the trend we have seen over the last few years has been companies instituting a no PO, no pay policy. And what we have seen and what Aberdeen has seen is that companies that institute this policy start to get anywhere from 30% to 50% increase in the speed at that they're processing invoices. And what that really translates to is going to be lower costs. The other thing that I wanted to point out here is that companies that are still dealing with a lot of paper are going to have a lot of overhead. They're going to have a lot of inefficiencies. They're going to have to route the paper by hand. And you have a tendency for paper to stay on people's desks. So what you want to do is you want to get the paper into electronic format as quickly as you can. And there's many different ways to do that that we'll cover in this presentation and also Michelle is going to be talking about. So just to kind of pull all of this together, when you have instituted these best practices, when you have centralized your invoice receipt, when you have simplified your invoice process so that you're not having to deal with overly complex invoices anymore, and you've instituted the automation, which means from the very beginning of when the invoice comes in, typically in electronic format, you now are starting to track everything that happens even globally around the world. And what this has allowed for the best-in-class companies is the ability to measure the AP performance and continue to fine-tune that. Because with the use of dashboards, with Business Warehouse and all of the reporting that you're going to be able to pull out of that, you can continuously fine-tune. And we have found that companies that are best in class typically do this at a minimum once a month. The other area that you gain significant advantage from is the standardizing of the invoice processing. So in companies that might be operating just in North America or companies that are operating globally, by standardizing how invoices are going to be processed, having the same business rules, realizing that there will always be a percentage that is going to be different from country to country because of specific rules. What we have found is companies that have gone through this have typically about a 50% faster rate of processing the invoice than companies that have not standardized. Also, we have found that it's much easier for them to continue to deploy, continue to roll out, and because things are so standardized, as you're doing your AP performance measuring and you find something that makes a difference, it's very easy to roll that new process or new procedure out across to the different sites. So when you pull these together with the efficiencies, the automation, the best practices, the global knowledge, all of this comes together and lowers the overall cost to process the invoice, which I said in the beginning has many factors to it. And what you're going to see with Michelle's presentation is how they have gone from manual, implemented these types of changes, focused on the automation, on the continuous tweaking of this. And when you summarize into three main components how these come together, what we look at, and also what PayStream Advisors talks about in their report, which you should go ahead and get, and we'll have some information on how to do that at the end, is to go ahead and look at e-invoicing, workflow, and OCR as the front runners of this combination, along with the best practices. So if we jump ahead, what you see here is you see how companies have moved heavily to the e-invoicing and to the workflow component. The e-invoicing isn't just portal, it also takes into account a very big trend that has taken place here in the United States over the last few years, and that is companies sending invoices as email attachments and having the automation to be able to strip that attachment off, bring it in the system so that a human does not have to touch that. And those things combined with the best practices pulls together on the next slide. What we like to focus on, which is quicker approvals. And when you have quicker approvals, you really have the ability to shorten that cycle time and the lowering of the processing costs. So what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to introduce the Global Accounts Payable Manager from WR Grace, Michelle Blessing, who's going to be talking about all of these concepts and how they're actually implemented at WR Grace. But before we actually get there, I think we've got one more poll. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Susie.
Thank you very much, David. So coming up on your screen now, we'd like to ask you, please, how many people manually process invoices across your whole organization? Is it 1 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 50, or is it 51 or more? So how many people manually process invoices across your whole organization? And we're largely talking, what we are talking about, accounts payable, so payable purchase invoices. How many people manually process invoices, payable invoices, across your whole organization? Closing the poll in 3, 2, 1. Just touched 70 in the nick of time, so actually on 72% of you responding there. Coming up on your screen, so you can see that most of you, it's 43%, it's 1 to 10, quarter of you, 11 to 20, and then just over 30% of you, 21 or more people. So interesting results. And now I'd like to hand over, please, to Michelle Blessing at WR Grace. Over to you, please, Michelle.
Thank you, Susie and David, and I also want to thank the audience for taking the time to attend today. I appreciate the opportunity to present the WR Grace automation story. Grace is about to celebrate its 160th anniversary, and we have offices in all regions of the world with approximately 6,000 employees. Grace is a New York Stock Exchange, on the New York Stock Exchange, and a member of the Fortune 1000. This webinar is entitled Riding the Wave to Successful Global AP Operations. What exactly is a successful global AP operations? I personally think it's a department supporting the business by paying liabilities accurately and efficiently with the lowest possible cost while still maintaining compliance with regulations. I think productivity, cost reduction, and controls are key elements for success. Consolidating accounts payable into a shared service center and leveraging technology brings those key elements together. Accounts payable handles close to 500,000 invoices annually for Grace. And now that we're in a shared service center, the time it takes to process an invoice has been reduced to an average of less than 3 days with a cost of less than $1 for each invoice. It nets approximately $500,000 in annual savings for the company. Utilizing technology has ensured audits are easily managed and SOX compliance monitoring is easier for everyone involved. Reducing cycle time can also improve vendor relationships and negotiations by ensuring timely payments and history traceability. We're currently striving to push global simple standard throughout the processes. Another benefit to a shared service center is one source for all things accounts payable. The road to best-in-class AP shared services, it's been a long journey, over 9 years worth of a lot of work by a lot of different people throughout the company, and has also involved process changes and the use of emerging technology. The Grace Shared Service Center officially opened in 2012. However, accounts payable started in 2009 in Manila. We'll go through explanations of each of the 5 phases. The first phase was to get rid of paper. This phase was actually started in North America by my, at the time, supervisor back in 2004, 2005 time range. We were processing invoices for one of the divisions of Grace, and she wanted to streamline the processes, getting rid of the stacks of invoices on our desk, while also ensuring AP received the invoices in a timely manner so we were not continuously spending time researching vendor complaints that ultimately resulted from missing invoices or invoices that never made it into accounts payable department for processing. It eventually resulted in consolidating North America payables into one location. With additional volume of invoices by consolidating for North America, AP staff increased to approximately 13 clerks, processing over 20,000 invoices per month. In order to meet the objective of removing the necessity of paper invoices, ReadSoft OCR, or optical character recognition software, was utilized, resulting in a dramatic reduction of lost invoices. No more paper sitting on people's desks. Ultimately, AP processes improved dramatically, and we were able to be a more organized department. We were also able to use email instead of faxes for problem invoices. Phase 2 was integrating into our ERP system. The second phase actually went hand in hand with the first phase, and the objective was to eliminate manual processing, so data entry into our ERP system. At the time, the AP invoices were manually entered into the system. The clerks had to type in the dates, the amounts, the purchase orders, etc., and that allowed for mistakes and slower processing. The goal for this project was to eliminate the need for manual entry and also to route invoices electronically for approval or issue resolution. ReadSoft OCR worked hand in hand with their cockpit processing software. This was deployed into our existing ERP system and allowed for invoice verification to become automated. AP didn't have to manually type information for invoices anymore. The information was taken straight from the invoice and uploaded into cockpit. AP even had the ability to verify PO line items from the invoice, so when uploaded, the system would check and match the PO in the ERP system for goods receipts, pricing, tolerances, etc. If all these items matched exactly, the invoice could be auto-posted without any more clerical intervention. A highly customized solution was also utilized for the routing of invoices using email notification, also attaching the invoice images. This eased invoice resolution and also enabled delegation of authority routing, invoice forwarding, and reduced the need for phone calls. Faxes and emails going back and forth between people to resolve invoice issues. Overall, this drove AP efficiencies and visibility. In 2008, Grace formed a global transformation team, and accounts payable was transitioned to this team. North America was tasked to pull Latin America in for processing. We started with Mexico and Brazil and successfully integrated into our existing processes. In 2009, the decision was made to consolidate Asia Pacific and Europe accounts payable into one accounts payable shared service center headquartered in Manila. Grace wanted tighter integration with our systems and to decrease costs associated with globally invoice processing. Due to North America's solution being highly customized, it was not possible to transition to the Manila Center. So not only ReadSoft OCR and Cockpit, but also the WebCycle systems were deployed in Manila. WebCycle allowed automated workflows to be generated for invoice issue resolution. Each country was gradually integrated into the Canlabang, Manila location. This accounts payable transformation involved intensive training, not only for accounts payable processors, but for the end user. Training documentation was also required in multiple languages, with numerous training sessions scheduled. Overall, once the transition was completed, accounts payable operations was an end-to-end streamlined process globally. However, AP still had two different processes for workflows, one for North America and one for Manila. Grace wanted to consolidate it to one way of users receiving invoice issues globally. North America was successfully integrated to ReadSoft WebCycle workflows in 2011. This involved another round of extensive training sessions for the accounts payable and the end users. Invoice image archiving was also integrated globally. In 2012, Manila opened the Manila Operations Center, MOC, in Alabang, a central location in Manila for many shared service centers. Manila accounts payable also moved from Canlabang to the MOC. Shortly after the move, Grace announced that North America processes would be transitioned to the MOC. Over the course of 2012, the MOC gradually took over processing of all North America invoicing. We did that systematically, location by location. Latin America was fully transitioned also into the MOC. We included Chile, Peru, Argentina, along with Mexico and Brazil. While invoice resolution issues were consolidated in WebCycle, due to North America original customizations required for workflows and having a different way of transferring invoices into Cockpit, North America was still on a different instance of Cockpit than Manila. As all processing was in MOC, Grace wanted to further consolidate processes and standardize globally. This year, Grace upgraded to Process Director and WorkCycle, which is the latest best practice solution from ReadSoft, and an enhancement to the Cockpit and WebCycle versions. The upgrade involved several months' worth of upfront work with ReadSoft to strip the majority of the customizations from all of our systems and consolidate into one system globally. The only customization Grace kept is the delegation of authority routing that is uploaded into WorkCycle daily. This follows SOX controls. We actually upload it twice a day, integrating any changes made during the system. Once system was ready for testing, I facilitated a 2-week training session for Manila Accounts Payable team and prepared them for training the end users globally. Training the end users occurred over a 2-week period with numerous sessions running in different time zones. The upgrade was 100% successful with an overall extremely streamlined system utilized globally. Grace is now using one standardized stable system for accounts payable processing and is currently reviewing how to improve processes further. One thing we're currently working towards is all invoices being directed to accounts payable, removing the middleman, thus further reducing the opportunity for missed invoices along with improving on-time payments. We're working closely with internal people along with reaching out to vendors to instruct them on how to submit invoices, providing invoice submission requirements. Currently, we have 65% of vendors in North America sending their invoices directly to accounts payable. We're striving to improve that on a daily basis. We're also reviewing how to go about getting Latin America, EMEA, and APAC invoices directly into accounts payable. This requires a lot of detail work looking at the government regulations, SOX compliance, different things that have to be done globally for each of the different countries. In order to do this, once we do this, we will further improve AP processes for Grace. I'll end my portion of the presentation by stating again that productivity, lowering costs, and controls are key elements to a successful global accounts payable operation. I am currently the Global Accounts Payable Manager. My main focus now is on the processes, on process improvements, and being the process owner. The Shared Service Center allows for an S2P manager that actually maintains all the employee relationships, monitors invoice statistics, monitors all of this improvement processes, any of the global projects that are run on that portion of it, leaving me to focus on part of how do I can improve productivity, how can I lower the cost, and how can I make sure that the controls are in place so that we're complying with all the regulations. David, would you please provide an overview of the key takeaways from this session?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So when you look at key takeaways from what we talked about, the business processes, and what Michelle emphasized in her presentation, a couple of things should jump out at you, and this ties in very nicely with the poll question on where you along the path of moving to shared service centers. And the first one is that no matter where you are in your journey, you know that the benefits are going to be worth it. This is what the best-in-class companies have done, and being able to eventually get that invoice cost down significantly shows that you're running a very efficient shared service center, AP processing center. Another key takeaway is that, and this was emphasized with W.R. Grace, is that multifunctional shared service center is really ideal, and that AP is really the prime area, or what we call kind of the low-hanging fruit, because there's so much benefit and so much ROI in this kind of project. And all the research that we have seen in the report that you guys can order really focuses on the importance of one person who's got responsibility overall at a very high level, because they really can make things happen, really help the efficiencies move along, break through some of the barriers that you run into. And very important, as Susie had stated in her portion of the presentation, really move into that integration capability where AP is actually a resource to the rest of the organization, because AP's got so much knowledge about how everything runs. And then the key thing to remember is not to look at this as individual parts. When you put the best practices in, when you have the automation of invoices coming in electronically, and granted, you'll never completely get rid of paper. We all know that. So there is out there for OCR. But when all of that comes together, what you're really looking at is the full end-to-end process, and the importance of being able to look at your metrics and being able to do continuous tweaking as needed. But it's really the end-to-end process throughout the entire organization, and the days of transactional processing just don't even think that way anymore. So with that, what I'd like to do in the next couple of minutes, and then we'll move into questions and answers, is just give you a little bit of background on ReadSoft. The first thing you should notice is that we've been doing this for a very long time. ReadSoft was founded in 1991, and ReadSoft was the company that brought in the OCR data capture market the self-learning technology. So when an invoice would come through from a vendor that might never have been seen before, the system actually learns that. So the next time it comes in, it processes much faster. If there are changes that are made, it doesn't matter because it'll learn it. So that technology started ReadSoft, and from that point on, ReadSoft focused on two areas. Data capture, which is being used all over the world, many different types of industries, many different types of data capture solutions that we have out there. And the other side of it was business process optimization, which has been a huge focus for ReadSoft. And we've grown from this small company that started in Sweden to over 590 employees in over 17 countries around the world. These offices are staffed by ReadSoft employees that have deep expertise in accounts payable, in capture, in the different ERP systems that are out there. And that has really allowed us to develop some very, very strong partnerships with companies like SAP and Microsoft and others. And what it really has done is it has enabled us to support companies that might be only processing 20,000 invoices per year to companies that are processing millions of invoices a year that are deployed all around the world, because we can put shared service centers all around the world. So the key thing that I'd like for you to take away with ReadSoft is that we are definitely the market leader in AP installations around the world. The solution is set up so that it is configuration based. The business rules are in there. The best practices that we talked about are in there, and we have something where you can go in and just do configuration. We also have ReadSoft in the cloud, which is pretty cool. And like I said, our customers range from companies that are very small, 20,000 invoices per year, to very large global companies. And what I really encourage all of you to do is to request the complimentary white paper, PayStream Advisor, The Road to Financial Shared Services. There's a lot of the information we went over is in this. And the way you get this is just to go ahead and send an email to beth.durrell@readsoft.com, and we'll make sure that you get that. And with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Susie, who will facilitate the Q&A.
That's great. Thank you very much to David and to Michelle. We've got a lot of questions, so let's kick off, please. So to actually to David, what is the best-in-class number of AP processes in a shared services organization model? Is this dependent on the number of invoices processed on a daily basis?
Susie, could you read that question again?
Sure. So I think it's really asking about what is the best-in-class number of AP processes. I think it's talking about productivity.
Oh, okay, I got you.
In terms of number of invoices processed per head, what kind of figures have you got on that, maybe, David?
Yeah, I'll give you the consulting answer on that one, and that is it depends. In reality, we see significant decrease in the number of people that are involved in touching the invoices and that are required in the process, because now the work is going to the person who can do it. So in some companies, we've seen them go from processing 30 invoices per day per person to processing 150 to processing 200. And it really depends on the resources that you have and the complexity of the invoice. But you can definitely consider about a 50% reduction in the number of people that are involved without even looking too hard by implementing the kind of best practices and solution that we were talking about here. So
okay.
That's a very good question. You just have to know a lot more about your particular implementation to be able to give you, really accurate numbers for that.
Okay. So just as well, just to share some data that we collect here. So it's generally considered, obviously, bearing in mind people have different situations, different number of invoice lines on the documents. But what we generally see is if you're processing, and we look at annual figures, so 10,000 invoices per annum or less per head, then you are in one of the lower performers. If you're moving to kind of 15,000 to 25,000 invoices per annum per head, then you're beginning to move in the right direction. That's kind of that's a low average to a high average, if you see what I mean. And then through applying automation and having straight through processing, you're looking to be kind of 45,000 per head per annum, and then really moving into the 60,000, and actually some organisations are looking at 100,000 invoices per annum per head. Let's move on. This question is for you, Michelle. You were talking about your cost per invoice calculation. Could you describe what is included in your cost per invoice calculation, please?
We take the number of invoices processed per month and divide it by the cost for the accounts payable department. The accounts payable department only processes the only cost associated with that is payroll.
Is payroll, okay, thank you very much. So no systems and no kind of overhead like desks or anything like that, it's just payroll.
Correct. No overhead and no systems.
Okay, and this is a question as well for you, Michelle. Are all of the accounts payable invoices processed in Manila?
Yes.
Thank you. For you, Michelle, are you using the ReadSoft collector?
We were in North America. We're still working systematically on how to get that done through Manila. We're actually right in the middle of a ReadSoft review. Tonight's our last session, and then we're waiting for ReadSoft to come back with recommendations on how we can streamline and improve our processes more. Okay, good. And again, Michelle, one for you, Michelle. Would you say that the greatest cost savings came from moving AP from North America to Manila, or where were the greater cost savings coming from? What were the kind of components? Was it the moving? Was it the technology? I think it was a combination. Mm-hmm. Technology really did improve productivity, mm-hmm. Which was able to allow for us to process more invoices. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, Asia Pacific does have a lower processing cost, mm-hmm. For anything. So that did play into the lower cost too. Mm-hmm. Okay, one viewer is saying, it sounds great, your story, but how do you handle, Michelle, the companies that continue to send paper to local addresses and not to the shared services organization? We're about to start implementing, I guess we would say, a mandate. You don't get, the first in, first pay policy, so the first ones that get it to AP, we're going to process those first. Mm-hmm. The other ones we're not going to. We're trying to eliminate the firefighting mm-hmm. that occurs with that. If it's to pick up the phone and call the vendor and say we're no longer going to accept it if you don't follow our processes, it might come to that. So we're going to do it in different ways based on the vendor. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll put this to David. Does one ERP system have an advantage over others in shared services implementation? Or are ERPs fairly kind of neutral in their relevance and application to shared services?
I can only talk from the two ERP systems that ReadSoft supports as far as this AP product, and that is SAP, which is a larger part of the business for us, but we also have a sister product for Oracle Financials, which has a pretty good market share. What's interesting is the solutions are very, very similar, as in the best practices are the same, the economies of scale are the same. So, my answer would be that no, because accounts payable and these very large ERP systems, we're really seeing them having the same challenges, the same issues that the best practices and the automation resolve and provide with a continuous monitoring. So I would say that there's not a distinct advantage of one over the other. I would say AP is AP, and the challenges are the same. But that is my personal opinion.
Okay, good. We see at Shared Services Link, in Europe, SAP does seem to have a little bit of an advantage in terms of its how many people use it. So normally when we do surveys, it's about 60% of the shared services market in Europe seem to be running off SAP. It's weighted slightly differently in North America, where it seems to be weighted either pretty much 50-50 or just ever so slightly in Oracle's advantage. So let's move on. Question to you, please, David. How much enhancement does ReadSoft take to make it compatible with specific company processes and ERP systems?
Well, I'll use the example of SAP, which is what I know the best. The ReadSoft solution, because it's been around for a long time and we've really made the effort to put the best practices and continue to put improved best practices in, is really configuration based. So we're not doing programming. We basically install the solution, have a workshop, and then we go in and we actually configure, for lack of a better word, the switches, which really drives, you know, the logic and the flows and the best practices, and also the languages, and there's a lot of country-specific functionality that's in the solutions. So, you know, typically we see that a project can be done anywhere from, you know, 3 to 4 to 5 months. The bottleneck is typically the customer's resources, because these kind of projects, you saw all the business processes. This type of project leans very heavily on the accounts payable expertise and not on the IT organization. So it's availability of the AP folks, which really drives how long a project is going to take. But the actual amount of work that needs to be done is typically about a 3-month project.
Okay, good. Moving towards our final set of questions, David, how does ReadSoft handle different languages and currencies?
The languages and the currencies are built into the solution and really leverage the language and the currencies that the ERP system supports. So for SAP, for example, we support the languages and the currencies because we're inside of SAP that SAP supports. The same thing for Oracle, and it's the same answer on the languages. When you move over to the capture side, we have, over the years, developed the profiles for many different languages from around the world, because if you're in a shared service center processing in Germany, for instance, you're dealing with a lot of the different countries that are sending in invoices. If you're over in Asia Pacific, you've got a lot of different languages, the same things in other parts of the world. So the capture piece is really our technology, and we support, I've lost count, there's just so many languages out there because we're in so many different countries.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So 2 more questions. One for you, please, Michelle. It's actually somebody wanting to understand whether or not you considered Mexico as a location for the Shared Services Center, and why the Philippines over another location.
I wasn't actually involved in that part of it, of the selection of where the MOC was going to be. Mm-hmm. I know they did look at different regions, and for whatever reason, Manila is the one that they came up with. I've been there. The people there are wonderful. It's beautiful. The service center location that they're at is 24/7, so it's a very safe and secure location with guards people are working 24/7 with the U.S. time zone. You hear English there all over the place. So maybe, and again, I can't speak to the final decision on where I was there, but maybe it was because of the language capabilities, because it is their second language over there.
And Susie, we have a lot of customers who actually have shared service centers in the Philippines. It's been a trend that's been taking place over the last 6 years.
Absolutely. Okay, good. All right. Well, look, thank you very much indeed to Michelle and to David. And we will be making this available, obviously, on our website, sharedserviceslink.com. Do make sure that you join us for our next webinars coming up in January. And thank you very much for your time and attention today. And we look forward to welcoming you next time. Goodbye.